All right, so in the unenviable position of being the last speaker before lunch, we are pleased to welcome Rachel Brombaugh. Rachel is with McKinstry. She's the finance manager at McKinstry, which is a leading design, build, construction, and energy services company. She's based in Seattle. And take it away, Rachel.
Thank you. It might not be very well known to this audience. And performance contracting is a procurement, financing, and project delivery method. It's all integrated that allows typically public entities to save energy, water, and money, and through this procurement mechanism by which the savings repay any funding that you use to take out for that. So McKinstry, with our partners, Western Resource Advocates, prepared a market study. I'm going to go over some of these results today on the potential for performance contracting in the Colorado River Basin states. I want to talk a little bit about drought resilience here, and it might again seem a little funny given the pouring rain and some of the flooding that's going on in the state, but just think of a little bit of fiction here. Think about analogy. And what would you say if your utility told you that you could not use power, no power between, let's just say 9 to 3 on Mondays and 5 to 8 on Thursdays? Just no use power. I'm not picking on utilities. Just say they said there's not enough power. You can't use power then. So that would be exactly what is going on in drought restriction mandates, like in California, where you need to use 25% less across the board. It's not a very smart way to think about it. Everybody uses 25% less. Or you can't water your lawn for Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever the days are. So really think about, this would be something we would think about as a blackout. So think about it as a dry out. And it's really not a very elegant way to handle constrained water supplies that all projections show there's going to be continued imbalance, particularly in the Colorado River Basin. So let's think of a new idea, a new vision, and this vision is the drought resilient city. And how do we get there? What do we look at? Okay, and this is going to be a city that uses less water with water efficient buildings in the built environment, both internal with low flow toilets and fixtures like that, low water landscaping, widespread adoption of automated meter reading and advanced meter infrastructure technology. And this is something I'm going to focus on a lot in this presentation, really talking about who is using water, when are they using water, and how much of that water are they using, forming the basis of a municipal conservation program. If you don't know who's using water when, I know utilities know who their users are. They regularly know who their top 10 users are. But if you don't know when, how much, why, times of day, it's really hard to manage that water use if you're a utility director. And I know some of you in the audience are, so you can align with that. And then let's talk about water meters that would enable, by smart water metering, that enables that capture of that data to understand where it's being used and also to recapture some of that water that's not being accounted for, can produce revenue that right now is not being captured, that can repay any kind of debt you use for this project, but also enable investment in other water infrastructure that's typically not done through performance contracting. I will go a little bit more through that. And really the key focus on performance contracting is that it allows the savings through the legislation that enables it. The projects can be repaid via the savings. So performance contracting is something that McKinstry does. I'll just give a little bit about us here. This is our vision, together building a thriving planet, and that encompasses water and energy. McKinstry is we are a 50-year-old firm, headquartered in Seattle. We have 20-some offices located in the western United States. We have a big office here in Golden with about 55 employees and growing. Colorado is a great state for performance contracting. We're actually doing some work here at CU, which we're really proud of. And I have been at McKinstry 5 years, and I work to understand our customers and our markets that we work in, and to show the financial value of our projects. That's why I got tapped and was fortunate enough to work on this project, which is working with Western resource advocates to study the benefits of performance contracting. And through this process, we realized that performance contracting was not well known in the water industry. So the study that we did, really, there were three main portions of it. Was to look at energy and water savings potential via performance contracting in the 7 Colorado Basin states, in public facilities, public water systems, public wastewater treatment plants, and then also look as an outgrowth of that, the revenue and the water savings potential via performance contracting for water meter replacement and retrofit with some of the advanced technology that's come in the past 30 years. And then we also identified the legislative and the programs, the legislative foundations and the programs that are out there in each state, and looked at some of the gap analysis and looked at potential funding sources, which is what I do with our customers. Colorado, as I mentioned, is a leading state in performance contracting, very robust, and leads with some of the best practices. But let's talk a little bit about some of the studies, the results of the study, pretty high level. And what we found were fairly phenomenal from our perspective, far beyond what we expected. And so when we looked at the water, energy, and money savings, all combined, we looked at total potential savings of $900 million. Huge electrical savings, over 6 million megawatt hours, good natural gas savings, and water savings. This is from the savings alone of 64,000 acre feet. So we were really excited about these savings. And we used, I'm not going to go into depth on the methodology. I'll be happy to answer any questions on that later. But we used national studies, national data from the DOE, the EIA, USGS, Bureau of Reclamation, all those studies to just look at it from a different perspective than maybe it had done before. When we looked at the potential for revenue generation and water recapture, we found that the numbers were also fairly spectacular. About $600 million net additional revenue could be realized basin-wide, obviously, in water utilities that implemented advanced metering technology in order to capture every drop of water that could be revenued and accounted for. And it really changes the reduction in apparent water losses. Big numbers here. I'll go a little bit more into this methodology here. And this is something that McKinstry and other energy service companies, ESCOs as they're called in the trade, do. We go in and we put in these water meters and we guarantee the accuracy of the meters. And particularly when they have that advanced metering technology, we can really dial down on that. Let me go a little bit into what performance contracting, let me do one thing. Let me show you what the savings were compared to some other programs that are being put out right now. And we've got the diversion project here with about 10 million acre feet saved, and that 10,000, sorry, thank you, Jorge. And that is about a $400 million project. And then we've got next to it the turf removal. I'm going to use my little handy dandy here. The turf removal in Las Vegas, which has gotten a lot of great press. You know, I saw a great, I don't know if it was Nova about that. The tamarisk removal, which has really good savings and may take a long time to implement. The southern delivery, which is actually a large project and with a large bill. And then the potential for performance contracts to save 64,000 acre feet a year. So all of these are different, a little bit types of different projects, obviously, with a little different stakeholders and different financings. But we really wanted to show the large benefit of performance contracting to save water and keep it in the reservoir, not use it. All right, now let's go into performance contracting. This is not new. It's something that's been around. It's been historically in the built environment. in public buildings as a typical client, just because of the legislative enablement. But national statistics are pretty robust. Since 1990, ESCOs, energy service companies, have designed and implemented over 45 billion in efficiency projects. This is nationally, and have guaranteed over $50 billion in savings, that's to the client, and have put in over $30 billion of infrastructure improvements, and provided over 425,000 person years of direct employment. And this is one of the reasons that it's championed by the federal government and state energy offices, is that it provides work. It provides local work. It is work that cannot be outsourced. And these are good family wage jobs, which is one of the things that's really important to not only to state and federal officials, not only from the energy savings perspective, but it does provide good family wage jobs, and the industry has also really worked to provide pathways for improvement and work plans for lots of different groups, so that there is that ability to build a trade as a pipe fitter or as an energy engineer and keep that talent here in the United States. So as I mentioned, there's legislation in all 50 states that encourages performance contracting, and most of the performance contracting does happen with the public sector. I want to emphasize it can be done in the private sector, but the public sector takes advantage of it primarily because of the ability to use performance contracting and ESCOs instead of the low bid. So what that performance contracting legislation does is it allows a public agency to select a provider based on a quality basis. And some states, like Colorado, have a list of qualified ESCOs that you, if you're a public agency, could choose from, or you can issue an RFP for a service provider, and you do not have to pick the lowest cost provider. That's the case in a lot of public procurement. You can work with somebody that will actually do the job right and do what you want them to do, and maybe meet the special considerations of your project. What it also does is it gives the real benefit of performance contracting. It's risk mitigation. It shifts the risk from the public sector to the private contractor, to the ESCO. And it does that two primary ways. One is through the guaranteed maximum price. This is how we, McKinstry, work. When we work with a public agency and we have scoped out a project and we say, this will cost you $5 million, it will cost you $5 million. And if it costs $4.5 million to deliver that project, you get that $500,000 back. We do not keep that. And anything that needs to be changed is documented via change order, so there's a lot of transparency there. The other thing is that we guarantee the savings. When we look to develop a project, we do a lot of engineering, and we know that we're going to save you $200,000 a year in energy costs, energy or water operations costs, whatever it may be. We will guarantee that. So that places the risk of performance back onto the energy services company. Lenders then look at that. They look at both us, they look at the project, they look at the financial wherewithal of the public agency. But that's the mechanism that really protects the agency who's entering into a performance contract. So how this works via a diagram here is that we've got the public agency here and the ESCO. We develop a project. You really could have two arrows here because this goes back and forth. There's a lot of iteration in developing the project. What's going to meet your needs? What's going to meet your budget, whether it's you're paying out of capital? What's going to meet your ability to float debt? What's in your long-term plans? This is not something that's just developed in a vacuum. Then during construction, as you can see, the public facility owner borrows money from a lender. The lender funds the project. They pay the ESCO, and the ESCO delivers the project. Just as a note, there's a lot of lenders out there that are really familiar with lending on performance contracts. They're very comfortable with that. They understand the cash flows. They understand the risks. So access to capital is not typically an issue. 5 years ago, it may have been when the capital markets were somewhat constrained, but it's not anymore typically. And then post-construction, this is super important, is that then the ESCO, we monitor and verify, we measure and verify and monitor too, the savings. We go back in a year later or 6 months later, and we look at the project. We make sure that you are indeed getting that $200,000 or whatever we said a year in energy and water savings. So we check that out. If that's not there, we fix it. And that's a key point. If that's not there, we will go in, we will change the machinery, make it work. Something's happening, check it out. This is why we get in there every year. And so that you do have that $200,000. If after that we can't fix that, we write you a check. We don't like doing that, and we at McKinstry have a very limited history of doing that, thankfully. But that's what the legislation does that protects the public agencies, is that any shortfalls need to be made up by the service company. So that's why these lenders get super comfortable with the cash flow from the savings, is that the ESCO goes in there and makes sure they're there and guarantees them so it flows there. And these are contracts, obviously, that we and our attorneys and the client's attorneys draw up, and we are guided by state legislation and state energy programs. So, and just a quick look at how this looks from the customer is let's say this is a customer. This is let's just say a $3 million project. Okay, and this right here is your utility baseline. If you did nothing, this is what your utility costs would be. Okay, and I think I've just got this escalating at 3%, so it's fairly moderate. But let's say you want to enter into a performance contract to fix your facilities, upgrade your facilities, make them more comfortable for your students, the people that work in your office, do the right thing, lower your bills, lower your greenhouse gas emissions, lower your water use, whatever your motivation is. You have a little bit of capital budget here, $750, so you're going to finance the rest of it to $2.25 million. So what happens is that during the term of your loan here, this blue line is your post-implementation utility cost. This is what it's going to cost you, just utilities alone. However, you are using some of those savings to repay debt here, and then the yellow is savings. So I've got this project, which is not unusual. We see a little bit of cash flow. It's in my words, budget accretive, but in probably layperson terms, it is you are getting cash from your savings just after you pay debt. And you can see it grows a little bit with escalation. And then after you've paid off your financing, your note, your bond, however you financed it, all those savings accrue to you. And you can do whatever you want with those. You can enter into a new project, you can hire more teachers, you can invest in more infrastructure in your water system, you can lower rates for your users or your taxpayers, up to you. So let's look at the study. And as I mentioned, the study had a lot of different components in it. Today, we're going to focus on water meters and what we found with water meters. And I'll show you some numbers, and I'll go a little bit into some of the methodology that we used. So how we got to this is that we looked at public supply withdrawals. And here we're using USGS 2010 data. And then we looked at reducing it by or actually taking that number down to what would be supplied to residential commercial use via water meters. And then we looked at both an adoption rate. There are, and this is a decent estimate. You know, there's varying levels of metering out there. There's some metering, there's no metering, there's very old metering, and some entities do have a lot of metering. Then, so we determined how many acre feet were used in there. Then we multiplied this by a weighted average water rate for the whole basin, and we used water rates from large cities as a proxy for each state. So we get to our total potential water meter size here. And then this is where we made some estimates based on what we think the increase in billable water is. So as probably most of you know, when water meters are old, they either overread or underread. Well, as per capita water use has actually gone down over the past 30 years. A 30-year-old meter, and that is the age of several entities with whom we talked and estimates on what the age is. When you look at an old meter, it's not going to read those low flows accurately. So you, the homeowner, are getting that water for free because the water utility is not charging you for it. Well, when you put in those meters that clamp down on that unaccounted for water, you, the homeowner, you will see your bill go up because now every drop that you use is being accounted for and billed. And we estimated at about a 10% increase in billable water. That's a very conservative estimate. I'd be curious if any of you water utilities out there, what your unaccounted for water rates are. But we've looked at McKinstry, we looked at some that are much higher. We've looked at some that are close to about 10%, but we figured 10% is a good estimate. So what that does is that generates potential annual revenue of $600 million. And we haven't even put in escalation rates in here. And it reduces your apparent water losses by almost 500,000 acre feet per year. That is not new and conserved water, it's water that is now being accounted for. So what we found with these, looking at performance contracting in the water meter market and just the water market and the built environment alone is completely independent of our study. The Bureau of Reclamation was putting out they're moving forward phase 1 report. And these are final versions, and their report has come out. Ours is being peer reviewed right now. We're really strongly aligned, and we found that performance contracting can help advance 80% of the major opportunities and almost half of the 51 potential actions identified for the municipal sector in the phase 1 report. I just want to go over some of the potential actions quickly, just to show you what they were and how performance contracting can fit in. One is promote adoption of advanced metering technology, speed implementation towards 100% metering and automated meters, explore funding mechanisms to help providers minimize system water losses, and implement innovative funding programs to provide incentives or funding of conservation programs. You know, performance contracting fits that to the bill, to a T. It is a program that hasn't been used much in the infrastructure market. We're seeing more use in LED street lights, more in water meters, but in general, it's been in the built environment. But it's time to bring that outside and really use this mechanism by which you borrow up front. I'll just be clear, you do borrow up front, and the savings repay your debt. It doesn't have to come out of your capital budget, out of raising taxes. So it's an opportunity really to provide that funding to help move that. And I think that's just been some of the missing link that hasn't been known. So really as takeaways, and I know I am the last thing before you and lunch, so I'll leave with these messages, and then I'll stay around for a couple minutes if anyone has particular questions, and I'd be happy to go in more depth on anything. But really the messages are, as we found, there's a substantial amount of money. And I know in Seattle, being green talks, and I can't speak to Boulder, but in most places, once we get out of Seattle, money is really what talks. So there's this huge amount of money, and I'm okay with that. Water and energy savings potential in the Colorado River Basin states. And, both, if you weren't even to do a water meter project, there's a huge amount of electrical savings that could be done in the public sector, in just existing K-12 buildings and existing office buildings. Performance contracting, again, is proven, not the new shiny new ball. It's been around for years. Lots of federal and state agencies have had very positive experiences doing that to both save money and reduce the consumption of resources. Water meters, a retrofit, both completely putting new meters in or overlaying advanced meter reading or advanced meter infrastructure technology that allows you to talk back and forth to your meter to understand where and when and who's using it. Those are the current technologies that weren't available 30 or 40 years ago. Again, that can provide the foundation for the effective conservation program. Again, you can't manage what you don't measure. Lastly, Policy, and maybe you could read policy as incentives and funding programs, but policy at a state and federal level, I think, could really drive some of these efforts. Water is, compared to electricity, it can be much cheaper, and you want to make those projects be able to pay back within statutory limits. So incentives to help move the needle, incentives, grants to promote the use and bring up awareness of performance contracting in the water meter market, or just water efficiency market in general, could really support moving that, providing substantial water savings throughout the basin. I put a couple contacts up here for us. Myself, Leslie LaRock, who's our regional director here in Colorado, and my colleague Jorge Figuera, who's here from Western Resource Advocates. But lastly, really, I think the key messages are here, and I think the opportunity really is frankly too large to ignore. So thank you.
I think we have time for maybe one question. I know people are probably eager to go to lunch, but let's take one question, and then I think you're willing to stick.
I'll stick around
down here for other people who might have
questions. My flight's not till
questions.
6, so I'm here for a while.
But yes.
Hi, I was just wondering if you had done projects with tribal governments.
We have not, actually. But in my second hat that I wear, I'm a board chair for a not-for-profit in Seattle, and we've done a fair amount of work, of efficiency work in tribal areas. There's a lot of tribal governments in Washington State. It's something that, no doubt, there is a need there, a strong need. It's just it's a little bit more challenging to work with the sovereign nations just because of their sovereign rights and just the challenges working in there. But I agree that's something that we should definitely, I think, is an opportunity for the market as a whole.
Thank you.
Okay, one more. Yeah.
Just simply leakage in the pipes. A lot of pipes are very old. I was actually talking to my colleagues in our Golden office, and they have worked with some municipalities here in Colorado that unbelievably, I have a hard time believing this, but still have wood pipes. And I've heard the city of Chicago still has some wood pipes that it uses instead of lead or concrete pipes. So those leak a lot. So that's where the water that you pump and pay for doesn't get to your end user, and you can't bill for that either.
Great. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Just like yesterday, lunch is upstairs on the second floor, and we will reconvene promptly at 1 p.m. Thanks.